Hey guys, I'm Brandon.
I'm Jason. Welcome to Open Process. Hope you learned some stuff. We're going to tell you what it's about.
We wanted to start a business. It's been like a thing we've talked about for many years. Just discussing things, we decided let's do something. Let's just make it happen. It's time.
And it's nice to embark on these sort of journeys with somebody else, you know. Sometimes motivation can be waning in some areas, but waxing for other people and others, you know. So you can bounce motivation off one another. It's more of a team effort sort of thing. And it can make things a lot less scary too. You know, people can pull one another along. In my experiences in the past with starting businesses have almost come from a place of necessity and not necessarily out of luxury, which brings on the element of running away from hell instead of running towards heaven. We had a few ideas for businesses and shooting the breeze, chatting about them. And then I can't remember whose idea it was, or if it was just both together. We were like, oh my gosh, why not? Or should I say, oh my fuck, why not, during this whole method of us talking about these things and picking at the holes and what could go right, what could go wrong, what would be good or bad, why don't we capture this? Other people might be interested in seeing how we do things, because we're both logical people. We both have a background in essentially doing research, learning logic, like literal logical operators and so on, and applying mathematics and science to everyday problems.
Yeah, so I think basically we started throwing ideas around. We actually started to discuss a few business ideas in a little bit more depth. And I mean, we're still pretty keen on some of those ideas, but we got to the point where we decided that actually, if we document this, that is something that is going to be beneficial for us as well, because I think having a record of everything is great. So we had a lot of things we needed to decide on. And what we got was we need to build a framework for starting a business. And I think you've got quite a few ideas already that you're very, like, you've even started like looking into a couple of them. Each of them is very different, but essentially, like, most businesses follow very similar process. And that's what open process is now. It's us creating a framework for starting businesses, and we are just going to be discussing it, and we're going to make it public for everyone to see what we're doing. We're going to start before the business starts, where we're just discussing ideas. What sounds good? Do we think this can work?
Yeah, that's right. So we're going to be building our framework and simultaneously applying a use case to that framework in the form of business or businesses. They might be concurrent if manageable. This isn't our full-time gig, so we need to be cognizant of that. So we are going to be developing this framework as we go and applying use cases to this framework as we go in the form of little businesses, maybe medium-sized businesses as well. We'll see how it goes.
So we're going to discuss a business that we decide upon, and we're going to start discussing the decision making before we start it. We're going to be documenting everything that we discuss during the business. We're going to go all the way to the success or failure of the business, whichever option it is. We kind of see this as like entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial thing, because there's two types of like business categories of mindsets that people have. Maybe you can talk more about that.
Yeah, the way I see it is there's essentially being an entrepreneur and there's being a small business owner. You could fall into roughly one of those two categories should you start something. I think the key differences between the two are an entrepreneur works on the business and a small business owner works in the business. An entrepreneur has the concept of starting the business from scratch, which is not all of the time, but most of the time, maybe. It's kind of maybe a loose definition. Small business owner might also do the same. The entrepreneur might have the mindset of exit right from the very beginning. They're not necessarily signing up for the long term, or
Yeah, they're not trying to create a family business to hand over to their kids. They're creating something that works. And once they're done with that, they're probably not interested anymore. They're like, on to the next thing.
Yeah.
I think by us literally creating open process, you could think of it as a shell company. Not that it actually is anything right now, but if we think of it in that way, then open process, we're already positioning ourselves above the business, like outside. We're not working in the business.
Yes, there's essentially there's a level of emotional divorce from the actual product or service, which it may be a detractor, it may be a bad thing if you are not like 1,000,000% emotionally entrenched in this thing that you're doing. We might apply more a sense of pure numbers and money behind this thing. The passion might not be there. And I think ideally there is that level of passion in the businesses that we start because we need that interest. I do think that like just the want for money is not going to be terribly fulfilling.
I think the one for money is not a driving factor, whether it's fulfilling or not. I think it's not a driving factor. It's not something that will keep us going. Like, I think we have to get some fulfillment out of it in another way.
I do think that money is a reasonable way to, as a reasonable metric to use as a measure of success in certain ways, like hitting goals, certain turnovers, those sort of things.
It's a metric for success or failure in our goals.
Yes, and I think there's also this adage of the man who likes to walk will walk further than the man who likes the destination. And I think it ties into the namesake of open process, particularly the process part of things, whereby we need to actually enjoy the process and not necessarily only enjoy the destination, because that implies that if only enjoying the destination, we gain fulfillment only right at the end. We would prefer a more continuous level of fulfillment. Us doing the things needs to be rewarding more so than having done the thing.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think it's also similar to like how some people go to gym and they continue going to gym, and some people try to go to gym to get to a goal, and they either fail or they don't. You need to enjoy doing the thing, or not, or at least like, yeah. Sometimes the thing is gonna suck, and you're gonna hate doing the thing, but there still has to be something keeping you going. It's not a goal. Like, if our goal for every business was to have $1 million, like, I don't know, valuation on each business, I think that's crazy. Like, we're gonna probably make many businesses that are gonna lose money, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles.
It's like Alex Hormozy says, you need to, the secret, there are many secrets, but one of them is um, working hard should be the thing that you strive to enjoy. If you can enjoy working hard, if that is what gets you out of bed, the mindset and the opportunity of, I'm going to work hard today. I love working hard. Working hard is dope. I'm excited to work hard. It doesn't actually matter what happens because you worked hard. It's irrelevant. You've decided, I'm going to work hard, and that gives me happiness. The outcome doesn't really matter. The outcomes will end up being nice. You can look at almost any sector of life where hard work is the primary driving factor for the success of something. Sure, there are like anomalies like genetics, whereby if you're not tall enough, you can't be a fantastic basketball player.
I think, yeah, Alex Hormozy had a very strong outlook on that, where, like, he basically even said, and I'm not quoting him because I'll definitely misquote, but basically, most businesses won't succeed because people aren't putting in enough work. Probably a lot of businesses would succeed if someone continued to put in the work. But if you tried hard enough, you might make it succeed. And that's the principle of working hard. And I think that's another thing that by having open process as a shell for doing a business, it's another level of keeping us accountable, getting us to do the work.
That's right.
We have to record these videos.
Yeah.
And if we don't have something to record, that means we haven't done work. So we had the tenets of open process. I think we've kind of discussed the one quite a bit now, entrepreneurship. The next one is remote work. You didn't really like the name remote work or the idea behind it, but maybe we're using the term a little bit more lightly in this way because we want to be able to have the mindset that whatever business we're starting, at some point, we don't have to be on site every day. Like we need to have the freedom that we can run things from our laptop remotely.
Yes. The way I see it in a weird way is similarly to the philosophy of a lot of software systems and embedded systems with respect to security. A lot of the time, people bolt on security as an afterthought, but it should be considered as an integral element to the system. In the same way that we should maybe build in the ability to remote work as part of the backbone of these businesses, but loosely on there. And I think what we came to was the concept of not needing to be on site every day, not eliminating the need to go on site for whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, that also links back to entrepreneurship because if you need to be on site every day, you're working in the business. You're not working on the business. The third one we kind of mentioned was scalability. I don't know if every business is going to be scalable, but I think it would be nice to have that as a goal, I think, for most businesses. But that would limit our ways of growing.
Yes, that brings me onto something, a saying that they say, if the juice is worth the squeeze. And I think that something that is not necessarily infinitely scalable, but something that you can do a little bit of work in the beginning and then just leave it alone and it can just tick along in the background. Maybe even if it generates $3,000 a month, $5,000 a month, that's groceries. That's a little bit of work now. It doesn't have to develop into this crazy company. It doesn't have to be able to scale. It can just be a little quick one and it just gets parked over there. And I think that could call for another form of framework, which we could call the juice versus the squeeze graph.
Yeah, that's probably a good one that we should introduce. The other one that we have going for us very strongly in the setup of our podcast right now is the jank versus value scale. So we have to evaluate every time we want to do something, how janky can we let this thing be by still extracting value from it? Like at some point, it's just going to be too janky for the value we're getting for it.
I guess you could call it like also maybe the cheap versus the nasty scale.
The cheap nasty, yeah.
So it can be this nasty if it's this cheap, and then we build in some, or this valuable.
But there's definitely thresholds.
Linear programming.
We can't have something that is too nasty. I think one of the underlying things we wanted is to have quality, and that doesn't. Cheap quality is not all. They definitely don't go together very often. So that's where this graph has to come in. We've got thresholds, everything like that.
Quality is something very difficult to define. There's a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which you don't need to be a fan of motorcycles or Zen things to enjoy it. I'd recommend it. In that book, they wrestle with the concept of what is quality. And if my memory serves me correctly, they land on quality is the intersecting point between function and form. So it needs to have both qualities of making you happy, but also serving its initial purpose.
We want to have an idea box. Every time we're talking, we're going to be coming up with new ideas, if we just run out of stuff to talk about in a current project, we're going to come up with something else, and we need to discuss this. But maybe it's not the right time. Like if we're in it, but like brainwave comes, you need to put it on ice. And what we've thought about was to put a cooler box in the video, and we'll write down our idea and then put it in the cooler box so that we can have it, bring it up at a later point in time.
Yeah, we keep it on ice. We don't let it die. Keep its heart beating, and
we gotta cool it down. Don't get too excited. Don't get distracted. Leave it in the ice box.
Put it on ice. And we've said, the whole like back of a little Soviet calculation, back of a napkin calculation. So we're gonna write some of these ideas on actual napkins and throw them in the cooler box.
Yeah,
because sometimes those brain waves happen when you least expect it, and they could have absolutely nothing to do with the thing that you're doing right now. They could just jump into your brain.
True.
I think it's there was a lecturer at UCT, Dr. Ali Reza Bagaiwaji. I challenge you to scroll to the bottom of his LinkedIn. Your finger will get tired. He used to talk about how he can feel his brain growing. And he would talk about the concept of emergence, which is when a third entity is born out of two other entities. I'm not smart enough to articulate it properly or recall it, but when I think of ideas coming out of the blue from absolutely nothing, I think of that man, and I think of how he was talking about how he can feel his brain, his neurons crawling inside of his head.
I actually wrote down some quotes from him because I really enjoyed how his brain operates. He would say how during his lunch break, he'll sit down outside, look at the trees, and just think about the complexity of a resistor. And for those of you who don't know, a resistor is one of the most fundamental basic components of electrical circuits, and it's very basic, but he will just sit and ponder about the complexity.
Yeah.
And that shows you how even the most simple thing is actually complex.
We thought that we might get into certain situations where we might have to make decisions that we both feel differently about, that we conflict over. And because the two of us, it's a 50-50 kind of deal. Perhaps we'd have heroes or champions over certain domains, something like that, where somebody's say has more weight. I don't know. We'll see how things go. However, it does present an interesting opportunity because we've also got a lot of people, hopefully, tuning in to what we're doing. And we might be able to involve them somehow in the business decisions that we are making. And audience participation, I think, will allow the viewers to connect with us quite strongly, feel part of the open process community. I think creating a community similarly to open source, whereby you have multiple contributors, this is potentially our way to open the door for multiple contributions from other members of the community.
Yeah, so open source is a concept in software engineering, software industry. Actually, not just software. It's a general concept where you make the design, the underlying system available for free for anyone to see. There are different licensing terms on those where you can like edit or change someone else's stuff. But the basic thing is that it's open for everyone to view.